And let's finish our show this week, Dr. Cole, with some NFL injury news, all right? Last week, in Week 6 of the NFL season, game between Seattle and Cleveland, Will Dissly, the Seahawks tight end, another devastating blow. He suffered an Achilles injury in their matchup against the Cleveland Browns, from what I understand, a non-contact injury. And Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seahawks, says he'll miss the remainder of the season unless something miraculous happens. It's a second season-ending injury for Dissly in as many years. He suffered a torn patella tendon in his right knee in Week 4 of his rookie season. This now is in his left knee.
You know, what's interesting about this injury, first of all, it's devastating having an Achilles injury. You and I know we've seen these in almost every professional sport. Recently, this year, we had an NBA disaster, and this is potentially very similar. But what's interesting with him is that he has a history of having a patella tendon injury, and it's not uncommon for people to have this condition of what we call tendinopathy, which has to do with the biology of the tendon, and to have two major injuries like that. A patella tendon is hard enough to get back from, also equally devastating, tends to happen in this age group. But an Achilles injury is of almost a very similar type of injury, different tendons. One tears at the muscle tendon junction, the Achilles, the patella tendon comes off the bone. But it begs the question, is there some inherent risk or biologic aspect of someone when they tear two of the strongest tendons in the body,
Even though they're opposite legs.
Yeah, well, they're opposite legs, and one's up at the knee and one's down by the foot and ankle. So it's an interesting, yet potentially troublesome issue. And not that you can do much about it, but it would be fascinating to get a better understanding of how many professional athletes actually tear more than one major tendon in different locations, because when that happens, it sort of raises some eyebrows and makes you wonder if there any sort of predisposition, or is this just really bad luck? But you got to feel awful for the guy, and these can be very challenging things to recover from.
And what's the recovery time? I would think an torn Achilles would take longer than a torn patella tendon.
Well, if it's they can both be season-ending. Unfortunately,
yeah.
I mean, these can be.
Isn't Achilles usually a year?
Yeah, it's about a year. And
you've done the torn patella a lot, right?
Yeah, the same thing. We've treated a number of those. I think they're both pretty challenging, to be honest. I would say that in general, an Achilles is probably harder to get back from a patella tendon, but they're both really tough injuries, and they're right up there with some of the more challenging ones to predictably get someone back.
Going back to the Chicago Marathon, all right, what were some of the most common injuries you saw through the doors of Midwest Orthopedics at Rush? Yeah,
we had a couple of stress fractures, mostly foot and ankle stuff. We had some individuals who come in with swollen knees who had never had a swollen knee before. After, when you run that much mileage, it's an overuse phenomenon where they just get a swelling in the knee. It isn't necessarily an injury, but there's so much repetitive load, and most people train up to 18, 19 miles are not doing the full run. And
that's a key then.
Right, there's a fundamental difference. You go beyond 18 miles. So it was a lot of stuff that will get better if they, put it this way, if they were made to wait a week, and I'm sure many of them were, a week or more, most of them probably would have gotten better. They're just repetitive use type things that won't lead to some significant time off, things like that. They get better.
Is one of your takeaways then when you're preparing for a marathon, prepare with the full marathon length?
Well, I don't. I would say that's not generally part of the traditional training programs.
Really? You're telling me they usually do 18, 19 miles and they go out and do 26?
Yeah, they may dabble up to that, but typically 20 to 22 miles would not be uncommon. But doing the full marathon, they kind of wait for the real event.
Wow. That's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard.
It's like me doing 3 preparing for a 10-mile run. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Once you get to the 18, 20, 22-mile range, then the adrenaline and the whole event sort of carries you as long as you pace yourself right.
But these are tried and true. Thus the injuries, right?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think there's a competitive side where people come out of the gates differently when they're in the real race versus when they're training. So the key is to keep that pace up to the 18, 20, 22 miles and not reinvent yourself when you go out and do the marathon, because I think that's when people get out of their sort of physical comfort zone.
All right, we got to run. Thanks so much to our producer, Shane Reardon, our coordinating producer, as always, Tracy Tarr. Also want to thank David Cole for managing our website and our business operations, as well as Samantha Smith, who ran in the marathon. She's our office coordinator from Midwest Orthopedics at Rush. For Dr. Brian Cole, I'm Steve Cashel saying so long. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening to us on Sports Medicine Weekly. Our website, one final time, sportsmedicineweekly.com. Up next on The Score, Early Odds with Joe Ostrowski. Talk with you again next Saturday, a brand new edition of Sports Medicine Weekly at 8 a.m. only on
670 The Score.